Hi there and welcome to All 24 News World News Program. I'm your host, Kunfa Zachary, and up next are the top stories. 36 martyrs as Zionist airstrikes bound the north and south of the Gaza Strip. The death toll climbs past 855 and Hamas vows to stay the course and negotiation responsibly. Coming up next, the Middle East situation escalates further as Houthis strike deep into Zionist territory and hit a U.S. aircraft carrier, while Zionist raids kill 4 in Lebanon and bomb Syria's Latakia. Also in our news, in Sudan, the army tightens its grip on Khartoum, seizing key sites. The RSF denies setbacks, while Al Burhan insists the military stays out of politics. And Russia and Ukraine trade blame over the truce. Washington weighs Moscow's demands as Zelensky pushes Europe to show strength. Stay with us for the details shortly. Welcome back to the program. It's great to have you with us tonight. We begin with Gaza, where at least 10 Palestinians were murdered and several others were wounded as Zionist airstrike pounded Gaza and Khan Yunis on Thursday. According to Palestinian media, an airstrike on a Nafaq street in central Gaza City left 7 dead and multiple others critically injured. Meanwhile, in the southern Gaza Strip, 3 more Palestinians, including a young girl, were killed when Zionist forces targeted a residential building and unleashed artillery fire on Khan Yunis. Similarly, 10 more Palestinians were killed yesterday's morning as Zionist airstrike continued to pound Gaza. According to the Palestinian news agency, warplanes targeted a residential building belonging to the Al-Garbawi family in a Saftawi area northwest of Gaza City, leaving 10 people dead.
We have seen the targets of Shika residential building. The ambulance was directed to this area and 7 martyrs were recovered from the place and a number of injuries. Until now, work is underway to rescue the injuries from the residential building because there is a large number of residents and displaced people in it.
And in a related development, a senior Hamas spokesman was killed in a Zionist airstrike early Thursday morning. Abdul Latif al-Kanu died when Zionist forces targeted his tent in Jabalia, north of Gaza. Hamas confirmed his death, saying several others were also injured. His killing follows the deaths of 2 other prominent Hamas leaders, Ismail al-Barhoum and Salah al-Bardawil, who were also targeted in airstrike earlier this week. In a statement, Hamas vowed that the targeted assassinations of its leaders would not weaken its resolve, but instead strengthen its commitment to the liberation of Palestine. The group described al-Kanu as a steadfast voice for its cause, insisting his death would not deter its fight.
The targeting of the leadership and spokespeople of the movement by the occupation will not break our will, but rather it will increase our determination to continue the path until the land and holy sites are liberated. The blood of the martyrs will remain a fuel and an inspiration for the resistance until victory. The martyr Abdul Latif al-Qanu was an example of steadfastness and dedication in serving his people and their cause. He carried the responsibility of the word and message with courage and accountability, defending the issues of our people and the justice of our resistance. He never hesitated to fulfill his role as a spokesperson for the movement, fighting for our people in all circumstances, despite the severe dangers he faced.
Meanwhile, Zionist airstrikes across Gaza have intensified, claiming the lives of at least 36 Palestinians in the past 24 hours. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, hospitals across the Strip have received 36 dead and more than 80 wounded as relentless bombardment continues. The surge in airstrikes has left entire neighborhoods in ruins, deepening the humanitarian crisis and overwhelming Gaza's already struggling medical facilities. Still with Gaza-related news, since the Zionist entity resumed its military campaign on Gaza, airstrikes have killed at least 855 Palestinians and wounded nearly 1,900, according to the Ministry of Health. In its latest update on Thursday, the ministry reported that hospitals in the Strip received 25 dead and 82 wounded in the past 24 hours alone. This brings the overall death toll since October 7, 2023 to a staggering 50,208, with more than 113,900 others injured. Amid the ongoing bloodshed, Hamas leader Mahmoud Mardawi emphasized that Palestinian factions have consistently engaged seriously with initiatives aimed at de-escalation. Mardawi reiterated that the resistance remains committed to negotiations, but accused the Zionist entity of backtracking on agreements, breaking promises to mediators, and escalating violence instead. He argued that this reversal not only underscores what he called the occupiers' arrogance, but also presents a new challenge for the international community.
The occupation's evasion not only reveals the arrogance of the occupier, but also places the international community before a new test, either to act according to law and justice, or to continue its policy of double standards, which threatens stability not only in Palestine, but across the region. The resistance affirms its readiness to continue its efforts and negotiations with full responsibility to achieve its goals. Resistance has never been reckless. It has always been and remains a legitimate means against oppression and a path to justice and liberation.
And as for the thousands of Palestinians, the nightmare of displacement continues. What many hoped would be a moment of stability has instead turned into renewed suffering. Zionist forces have once again forced families from their homes, only to strike the very routes designated as safe. Displaced Palestinians, already fleeing for their lives, are now being targeted with nowhere left to turn. The insights with Hossein Burkan in this report.
Noor Shams refugee camp, once a shelter, is now in ruins. Families returning after Zionist assaults find only devastation. The UN reports nearly 40,000 displaced in the West Bank as homes and infrastructure are destroyed.
These are our neighbors, our loved ones, and our dear ones. May God reward them all. We grew up and lived here. This is where our memories and lives are. We are no better than the people of Gaza, who have lost more than we have and shed their blood. There are 70,000 martyrs in Gaza. Houses don't matter, and if God wills, things will get better for everyone, and we will return to the camp, even if we have to live in a tent.
UNRWA calls the West Bank a battlefield, warning of a worsening crisis, with homes and services destroyed. Thousands lack basic necessities as aid falls short, yet residents remain determined to stay.
We received the news that my uncle's house and my grandfather's house will be demolished. We came and took what we could. As you can see, a person cannot abandon the olives of their homeland. How could they abandon their home? Praise be to God, Lord of the worlds.
With Zionist forces continuing their operations and no political resolution in sight, the suffering in the West Bank is expected to worsen. Families who have already lost everything now face an uncertain future as they hold on to hope that one day they will be able to return to what remains of their homes. For now, survival is their only option.
Meanwhile, regional tensions continue to escalate. Yemen's Houthi group has claimed responsibility for two military operations targeting both the Zionist entity and U.S. forces. According to Houthi military spokesman Yahya Sariyah, the first attack struck the entity's Ben Gurion airport and a military site south of occupied Jaffa using ballistic missiles. The second operation targeted multiple warships in the Red Sea, including the U.S. aircraft carrier Truman, with a barrage of missiles and drones. At the same time, U.S. airstrikes have intensified in Yemen. Yemeni media report that at least 2 people were killed and others wounded after American warplanes hit the Al Arqub area in Sanaa's Kaulan district. In total, more than 15 air raids have been launched since last night, targeting several Yemeni cities, that is.
In support of the oppressed Palestinian people and their steadfast resistance, the missile force targeted the Ben Gurion airport in the occupied Jaffa area with a Dhul-Fiqar ballistic missile. In response to the ongoing American aggression against our country, the missile force, the drone air force, and the naval forces carried out a joint military operation targeting enemy warships in the Red Sea, including the American aircraft carrier USS Harry Truman, with several ballistic and cruise missiles, as well as drones.
وذلك بعدد من الصواريخ البالستية والمجنحة والطائرات المسيرة.
And elsewhere in the Middle East, still tensions in southern Lebanon are also on the rise. Early Thursday morning, occupation airstrikes killed 4 Lebanese in 2 separate attacks in the Tyre district. According to local sources, a Zionist drone struck a car in Yamar Shakif, killing 3 people. A 4th person was killed in another airstrike targeting a vehicle in the town of Marub. Meanwhile, in Syria, Zionist airstrikes have once again hit key targets. Early Thursday morning, occupation warplanes carried out multiple air raids on the coastal city of Latakia. According to Syria's state news agency SANA, the strikes targeted areas near the White Port and other locations in the city. Authorities are now assessing the damage and working to determine whether there were any casualties. To another development, but this time in Africa, the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, Mary Lawler, is calling on Moroccan authorities to end the repression in Western Sahara. In a Facebook post, she expressed deep concern over reports that Sahrawi activist Mahfouza Bamba Lefkir was assaulted by Moroccan police. Lawler is urging a full investigation into the incident.
I strongly condemn the assault by Moroccan police forces on Mahfouza Bamba Lefkir, a human rights defender in the occupied Western Sahara, which left her injured. I call for an investigation into this incident and emphasize the urgent need to end the ongoing repression against human rights defenders in the occupied Western Sahara. These assaults pose a real threat to the lives and physical safety of all those who struggle and advocate for the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination, especially those who monitor, document, and report the various violations of international and humanitarian law committed by the Moroccan occupation in the occupied Western Sahara.
In Africa still, but this time in Sudan, the military is tightening its grip on the capital. The Supreme Committee for Emergency and Crisis Management says all federal ministries, government offices, and agencies in central Khartoum are now under army control. Officials confirmed that Sudanese forces have also recaptured key sites, including the airport, security, and military headquarters, and several neighborhoods east and south of the capital, for the first time since the conflict erupted in April 2023. They're calling it the start of a major liberation phase across the country. Meanwhile, the army says it has seized an advanced drone jamming system used by the Rapid Support Forces in Khartoum's Riyadh suburb. In Sudan still, celebrations erupted across the capital. Massive crowds took to the streets of Khartoum, marking what they see as the city's liberation from the Rapid Support Forces. The celebrations come as the Sudanese army, led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, declares full control over the capital. Similar scenes played out in Port Sudan, where residents hailed what they call a major victory, urging the military to push forward and extend its control to the rest of the country, particularly the remaining parts of Darfur.
Congratulations for the Army's victories, the confirmed and supported victory. God willing, we will move forward, and all Sudanese people, God willing. I salute the armed forces, the joint forces, and the reserve forces, and all of the Sudanese people. Congratulations, God willing, to more victories. Al-Fashir Al-Njnina is in sight, God willing.
Despite the Army's claims of full control over Khartoum, the Rapid Support Forces insist they are far from defeated. In their first statement since the battle for the capital, the RSF say they haven't lost a single fight, just repositioned to press forward with their objectives. Meanwhile, Sudanese forces are ramping up their offensive elsewhere. The Army's 6th Infantry Division says it launched a high-precision drone strike in El Fasher, taking out an RSF jamming system and eliminating at least 10 fighters. But as the battle intensifies, so do civilian casualties. 8 people were killed and 5 others were wounded in indiscriminate shelling on Wednesday. Against this backdrop, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is emphasizing a political future. Meeting with Germany's special envoy, he reaffirmed the Army's commitment to paving the way for civilian rule, promising elections and a renewed push for peace talks. Moving on to South Sudan now, which is on the edge of crisis too. The United Nations is warning that the arrest of First Vice President Riek Machar could push the country into full-scale conflict. The head of the UN mission, Nicholas Haysom, is calling for restraint, urging all sides to uphold the 2018 peace agreement. The opposition SPLM party isn't backing down, calling the arrest a violation that renders the peace deal meaningless. Meanwhile, the African Union is voicing deep concern, with its Commission Chair, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, urging immediate de-escalation. Two other topical developments now. Russia's foreign ministry says the proposal put forward by the US isn't an extension of a previous deal, it's an entirely new agreement. Spokeswoman Maria Zakharova clarified that discussions are ongoing, but this initiative is separate from the earlier UN-backed memorandum that aimed to facilitate Russian food and fertilizer exports. In a related note, the U.S. says Russia and Ukraine have agreed in principle to a truce after talks in Saudi Arabia, but with Moscow setting conditions and Europe insisting on sanctions, uncertainty remains. Here's Osama Ayadi with more in this report.
The Black Sea, a battleground no less fierce than the battlefields between Russia and Ukraine. In this arena, U.S. efforts to mediate between Moscow and Kyiv appear to be on the verge of a crucial test. Washington's announcement of a preliminary agreement to ensure the safety of navigation and a ceasefire at sea was met with Russian conditions that put a damper on the negotiations, particularly the lifting of sanctions in exchange of any de-escalation.
Yesterday, following technical-level talks in Riyadh, Russia and the U.S. agreed to begin implementing the Black Sea Initiative. The initiative speaks to safety of navigation in the Black Sea, non-use of force, and avoiding the use of commercial vessels for military purposes.
The depth of the economic complexities of the conflict prompted Moscow to clearly state its conditions. The essence of the Russian demand lies in the lifting of restrictions on its financial institutions and the lifting of sanctions that hinder its exports of agricultural products and fertilizers.
Russia-Ukraine.
The United States appeared partially open to this approach, declaring its willingness to help Russia regain access to global markets. However, this openness clashes with a more severe European position.
Obviously, after our meeting, as part of their release, the Russians detailed a number of conditions that they want to see met in order to do that. So we're going to evaluate that. Some of those conditions include sanctions that are not ours. They belong to the European Union. So we're going to be gathering and sort of, when our folks get back, sitting down, going through the proposals, getting their impressions of the conversations, so we can more fully understand what the Russian position is or what their ask is in exchange.
While the Ukrainian president is counting on the American pressure, hoping for an unconditional cessation of military operations, Russia is insisting on lifting restrictions on financial transactions, facilitating port services, and ending sanctions on Russian ships. Amid these tensions, the European summit is being held in Paris to discuss ways to support Ukraine militarily and politically in the face of Russia.
In a related note, speaking at a high-stakes summit in Paris, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky urged Europe to prove it can defend itself. In a social media post, he doubled down, declaring Europe is capable of defending itself. Now it must prove it. His message came alongside a photo of Allied leaders gathered in the French capital. Similarly, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer made it clear now it is not the time to ease sanctions on Russia. His statement came after meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders in Paris, where talks focused on bolstering Kiev's position. Let's take a listen.
More support for Ukraine to make sure Ukraine is in the strongest possible position, both now and in further negotiations. Second, complete clarity that now is not the time for lifting of sanctions. Quite the contrary, what we discussed is how we can increase sanctions to support the US initiative to bring Russia to the table through further pressure from this group of countries.
Moving on to another development, but in the US now. President Donald Trump has announced a 25% tariff on imported cars and auto parts, a move that's already sparking backlash. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney vowed to respond with countermeasures, while European nations have also threatened retaliation. Let's get more on this story with Nabil Khazini.
These tariffs will result in over...
After imposing them one day and suspending them the next, US President Donald Trump shifted into overdrive in his trade war by announcing a 25% tariff on cars and car parts coming into the United States. Trump argues the measure would spark tremendous growth for the industry, promising it would ignite job creation and attract investment to the United States.
We're going to charge countries for doing business in our country and taking our jobs, taking our wealth, taking a lot of things that they've been taking over the years. They've taken so much out of our country, friend and foe, and frankly, friend has been oftentimes much worse than foe. And this is very modest. And what we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
However, analysts have cautioned that the move could bring car production in the US to a standstill, push prices higher, and put a strain on relationships with allies, creating ripples of tension across the global stage.
President Trump campaigned on a promise to completely overhaul America's relationship with its trading partners in Europe and Asia, and even in North America with Canada and Mexico. And he is doing that. On Wednesday, he announced his most aggressive step. It's also likely to attract retaliation from the Europeans and the Canadians who are angry about seeing their exports to the United States hit with a tax.
The anger was evident on the streets of Canada, where people protested against US tariffs. This comes as relations between the two longtime allies have soured since Donald Trump threatened to annex Canada as the 51st state and imposed tariffs.
If I had to talk to Donald Trump, I would say, drop the tariffs. Canada is your friend. We're your ally. We don't want to be fighting you guys, but we're going to do what we have to do if you keep threatening our sovereignty.
Nearly half of the cars sold in the US are imported, and Trump's tariff will add at least $6,000 to the sticker price of the average car.
It's time now to catch up on other news stories making headlines around the globe with Marwa Belaiwer in the News in Brief.
Ukrainian Army Chief General Alexander Syrsky said Russian forces are stepping up attacks in the northeastern Sumy region. He said Ukraine is mounting defensive and offensive operations to stop further Russian advances. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched 86 drones and a ballistic missile overnight. 42 drones were shot down and 26 failed to hit targets, likely due to electronic jamming. Mauritania has denied claims of mistreatment of undocumented migrants during deportation operations, affirming that the process was conducted in line with legal standards. Government spokesperson Al-Hussein Wuld Meddous stated in a press briefing that the country is committed to adhering to international and bilateral agreements on migration. He also noted that Mauritania has provided incentives and assistance to encourage migrants, particularly those from Senegal, Mali, and Côte d'Ivoire, to regularize their legal status. Dutch police said that a knife-wielding assailant in Amsterdam seriously wounded 5 people, including 2 from the United States, 1 from Belgium and 1 from Poland, in a stabbing attack Thursday on a busy shopping street. The attack lasted several minutes before the assailant was stopped by a passerby near the city's Dam Square in the late afternoon. Police cordoned off the area and several ambulances and a trauma helicopter were called to the scene. South Korea is battling its worst wildfires on record with at least 28 people dead and 32 injured. The government said that fires have scorched some 387,000 hectares across 10 regions, mostly in Gyeongsang province, since last Friday. Around more than 37,000 people have been forced to evacuate. The scale of destruction far exceeds the country's previous worst wildfires in 2000.
And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we reach the end of our program. For more updates or to catch up on any part you missed on our social media platforms are under your service. From me and the rest of the team, thank you for keeping it here on All 24 News. Till next time, have a good one.